Good morning. My name is Rick Sundahl. I am with Grey Wolf Systems, and I really appreciate you taking the time today to go through a quick overview of web services and what we have to offer on that for Prophet 21. I am going to be going down a little bit the bunny trail in the sense of talking about technical stuff, but I'm also going to have some limitations on that in the sense that we've got an hour. We could probably talk about this for a day. So what I'm going to try and do is keep it as high level as I possibly can and then answer your questions. So please use the group chat and let me know if you have any questions as we're going through this. We will address those at the end. But if you have, I'm trying to keep an eye on the chat as we're going through this to see if there's anything in there that I need to address as we're going along. And I have no problem with answering questions as we're doing stuff. If there's a question that makes sense, I will stop right there because it makes sense to address it at that point. But if not, we'll address everything at the end. Here's the agenda, and it's kind of free-flowing. I've not got a script here. This is really meant to be for you, not for me. So I'm not trying to give you a presentation that's just going to be covered by rote. I am going to go through an introduction, ask you to answer a question on the polls to get a little bit of feel for your background, not personal stuff, but just one question. And then we're going to go through terms and definitions. That's probably the most boring part of this. And then we're going to spend most of our time in the objectives. In other words, what are we trying to achieve? And go through, and I'm going to be doing some live demos, showing you some things as we're going through it, and hopefully addressing the objective that we've got laid out for you. And then ultimately, how do you get started? Where do you take this information and what do you do with it? And again, keep in mind that you don't have to take a whole bunch of notes because this will be recorded and will be made available on the website hopefully fairly soon. So it's not that big of an issue for you to have to go through and review your notes on this. Grey Wolf Systems, we are a solution provider. We actually used to be a services provider with Epicor, and we've dropped that because it didn't make sense to do that as time went on. There's a whole bunch of things if you want to take it offline of why we dropped that, but we are very tightly coupled with the P21 world. My background is I have a whole bunch of, they're called TLA, three-letter acronyms behind my name, even though some of them are four. But basically, I'm a certified management accountant, certified blockchain solution architect, certified computer professional, and certified consultant on the CMA, which is for strategic aspects. But with all that, while I've got both the technical and business background, I want to try and bring not just the technology that we're talking about today, but apply it. What difference does it make? It's all nice and good. Bear with me on that. I'm going to get a little propeller head and talk about some technical stuff, but I'm hoping to refer back to why do you care? Why you as a Prophet 21 user do you care about what we're talking about today? The web services timeline is this. We've actually been doing P21, our first P21 customer we got involved with 5 years ago. We actually went to the Worldwide Users Group conference that year, but we joined as a sponsor in 2015. And the real kicker to it is that in 2016 is when we had our first web services customer. Now, why am I talking about that? The biggest reason why I'm talking about that is because why are we even here? If you're aware, Epicor does have a set of APIs, or they call it middleware. I'm not going to get into a whole bunch of detail on that. I'm going to talk a little bit about the fact of what's going on with the scheduled importer. But on the API stuff, I actually went to the Worldwide Users Group conference. I went to the Epicor conference and talked directly with them and said, hey guys, why shouldn't I just use your APIs? When I looked at their architecture, and we'll talk more about our architecture, when I looked at their architecture, looked at their pricing model, looked at where they've been promising what they can deliver on, I realized that we needed to create our own. And that's why we started developing, after 2 years of investigation, we developing our own set of web services and APIs. And that's why we did in 2016. So we've been doing this for quite a while. We've been doing this for over 3 years here shortly. And so it's not like it's new technology. I did present at the Worldwide Users Group 2 years ago, this concept, but it's something that's been going on for quite a while. So I wanted to introduce you to the timeline of why we did this. If you look at Forrester Research back in 2015, this is an interesting quote. APIs are perhaps the most critical technology in digital business design. APIs aren't new. APIs and web services aren't new. The terminology is to a certain aspect, but integration's been around for quite a while. If you look at just straight ODBC, that's been around for quite a while. What we're going to talk about today are how do we take the technology that's available and integrate it with your P21 environment so that you can actually use it in a simple format and take the latest, greatest technology, as you can see on the screen, start getting into mobile or Internet of Things kinds of devices. More importantly, what we focus on is the partner and external divisions. That's where we kind of focus our stuff on, but that doesn't mean that's the only place it can be used. So let me get a poll going here. So let's launch the poll. And if you'd fill this out for me real quick, this is the only thing I'm going to ask. How technical are you? Because I want to know how far down the path I want to go on this of being real technical. This is not going to be, something that I'm going to use against you, that kind of stuff. It's going to be purely for my own edification of how I can present today. We'll give it another couple more seconds here and we'll share it. And I kind of figured this is the way it would play out. All right, so I'm going to end the polling and I'm going to share the results just so that everybody can see it. You can actually see that I'm going to get propeller head. Since some of you guys are very technical and some of you are somewhat, if you're not, bear with me on that and we can take things offline. But I wanted to get to a point that I knew how far technical I wanted to get on this. Let's stop sharing the results and let's get back over to the slide deck. So let's go through some terms and definitions. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. What are APIs? API stands for Application Programming Interface. My definition, the simplest way for it is it's for code to be able to call other code. It's an interface. It's an application from a programming perspective to interface. Now, programmable web is somebody that we've actually registered our APIs with, both for all of the APIs that we've got out there. We have positioned it out there, and I took their definition. And it basically allows applications to talk to one another. It's at a programming level. It's not at a user level. So the user, and we call it an adapter is the set of code that wraps around it and consumes the APIs. So if we get on the same page, basically an API in and of itself does nothing. Because it does nothing, you've got to understand that just because you have it doesn't mean it's going to do anything at that point. And I don't want anybody on this call to think, oh, gee, if I use the APIs, it's just going to be plug and play in the sense that I'm actually going to make it work just out of the box, kind of like ODBC does. It's a little different than that. What are web services? Web services, and I'm going to get to Wikipedia, and I'm not a real fan of Wikipedia, but the problem is there isn't anybody that does a lot of definitions in our world, so it's a good starting point for that. But basically, if I take this definition, our world is web services wrap around those APIs. And what we've done is we've taken and made the APIs exposed to a protocol for the web. In this case, they're saying for the World Wide Web. That's nice old school technology. It could be also internal if you look at it that way. But basically, we've created an HTTP protocol that calls the APIs such that it makes it real easy for us to expose those APIs. I want to get in again technologically. What is REST? You've probably heard of REST, and Epicor uses this concept of a RESTful set of APIs that they've got. And quite honestly, REST is not a protocol. REST is an architectural style. It's using a defined set of constraints that talks about things like put and get and post. That's the definition of those things. But in our world today, it's different than what we're going to talk about next, which is SOAP. Bear with me just a second here. I'm hearing something in the background. I think I got, there we go. And what I want to talk about is SOAP, because quite honestly, to be upfront with you, our APIs are primarily SOAP. And it really doesn't make any difference which way it is. And I'll talk about that in the next slide. But SOAP is for Simple Object Access Protocol. It's truly a protocol that uses some sort of other protocol, HTTP, SMTP. It's just a way to put a wrapper around it. And I'll get into a little bit more detail on that when I show you some things as we're going through it. But I wanted to get through the definitions. And probably the most important slide is this one. And I'm not going to read it to you because you can read. But the bottom line is that basically there's no specific standard for REST, whereas SOAP does have standards. More importantly, just because someone says that they're RESTful doesn't mean that it actually truly follows the constraints that are set, because there are no constraints. So if someone says, oh, you're using SOAP instead of REST, I really don't care, quite honestly. They're 6 1/2 dozen to another. So if anybody starts talking about architecture and saying, oh, you're using REST or you're using SOAP and this is good and this is bad, it's kind of like the difference between saying I'm using Java versus .NET versus PHP. It really doesn't matter what architecture you're using as long as it accomplishes the goal that you need to accomplish. So now that we've gotten through those terms and definitions, now let's get to the meat. The meat is, what is it you're looking for? What are you trying to achieve? And I'm hoping, and guys, give me some feedback on this one if you can with with some sort of a chat or a thumbs up they have on there for the participants. You can actually say thumbs up, thumbs down, those kinds of things. But basically, I believe, and this is what we found over the years we've been doing this, you're looking for an affordable and secure way to query, insert, and update your back office data, P21, in an intuitive fashion. What does that mean? That means you want to integrate, you want to get to P21, and you want to read and write to it in a cost-effective, secure, and it's got to make sense, because most of you are technical, and we'll get to the end of how you can do this. But let's assume you're going to do this yourself. You want it to be intuitive. You don't want it to be something that you're doing where you have to kind of think twice about it. I use the analogy of driving a car. When you get into a brand new car, when was the last time you looked at the owner's manual before you sat in the driver's seat and took it for a test drive? You pretty much know what a car is going to do because it's intuitive. You got the steering wheel, you got the gas pedal, you got the brake. I want to have the same kind of technology for your integration tools as well, and they should be affordable and secure. So let's go through the things that are in red. Let's go through each one of them one at a time. And this is the one we're going to spend most of the time on. I'm going to do demos on. That's functionality. Functionality comes down to, what is the architecture? What are the features? Is it scalable? Is it something that actually gets the job done? What's the functions to it? So let's dig into that. First thing I'm going to do, and I'm going to do this from live so that you can actually see it. If you go to our website, you'll be able to see a lot of the things I'm doing. Unless I get into my account, everything I'm doing in my account, you're going to need a login for. But everything I do from our website, you're going to have access to. So let's go look at web services, and you can see we've got a series of different web services we've done. Let's go to the Prophet 21, and we'll get down in the pricing another point, but just so you know, all the pricing is here. It's available to you. Let's go look at the web services listing. Now, what I want to talk about here is, what does this mean? This is actually the URL when you write code that you're actually going to call against. What is this showing me? This is showing me all of in this specific term, these are all of the APIs that have been exposed through the website. So the APIs actually sit on your server. What you'll do is you'll install a set of DLLs on your P21 box, and you'll then have those available to our server, and our server will serve it up. Now, what we're seeing here is obviously exposed to the public. So we'll get into the concept of an API key. We'll get into the security aspect here in a little bit. That was one of the things we had on our deal. But let's leave the security out for right now. But let's go look at what we've got here available to us. Well, we've got WSDL, XML, and JSON available. That's a lot of the protocols that are available in a SOAP world. So you're not going to have get, put, their naming structure is not going to be that way. And quite honestly, I think it's counterintuitive to use that kind of technology. If you want to go let's look at this one called Sales Customer Select. And I can go look at the XML and JSON. but I'm going to look at the WSDL because this is a little bit more intuitive of what I'm looking at here. This first grouping are the things that are going to be the input parameters. So you're going to input a company ID, a customer ID, and you're going to pass an API key. Again, I'll get back into the API key a little bit later. And the results set are going to be all of these fields that you see down here, and it tells you whether it's nullable, what kind of field type, is it a string or a decimal, and you can see that we've exposed a lot of fields associated with it. That's on the sales customer select, for example. Let's talk about, and we'll talk a little bit about the intuitive, but I want to go through and explain it here real quick for you. We've broken out the APIs specifically that are exposed through the web services. We've broken them out into items, purchasing, sales, and then we'll come down. We have general as something that's outside, but primarily the three are items, purchasing, and sales. Then we've added at the end, we've added for all practical purposes, it's a modified SQL approach where you have either, say for example, you have select, you have a concept called a list, which isn't a SQL command, but again modified. We have insert and updates. We have extracts. We have all kinds of abilities of what we're going to do. And then the middle portion says, which element are we going to do it with? So for example, we did sales customer select, sales customer list. And if we look at it, we have a sales customer invoice list, sales customer invoice line select. We have a lot of different things available to us, and this is exposed. And as we develop new ones, we post it to this to make it exposed for consumption by developers to actually do this. So we've kind of gotten into this. Again, if we go look at other ones, we'll see the same thing from a WSDL perspective. There's really kind of two types of APIs that can be exposed by web services. The two kinds of APIs are typically a data level API and an application level API. Best example of that, a data level API is say, go get me all of the customers that are in P21. That's going to go down to the database level. Theoretically, you could do that with ODBC. You could do it with a SQL query. You could do it with all kinds of other tools for a data level approach. Why do I want it with this? Is because this is actually using a much faster, more scalable technology. Like I was talking about the functionality. Scalability is important. When you get into ODBC, it puts a whole bunch of overhead on it, and security comes as a big overhead with ODBC. SQL queries you don't necessarily want to use per se. You can, but you got to open up some sort of connection string. In this world, we're actually putting that connection string and embedding it into the web service. The second type, which is more important, which you cannot get from ODBC or any other type of technology, unless you want to write some code, is the concept of an application level type of an API. What would that be an example of? Well, the best example that I know of is sales customer pricing select. That means that I'm actually going to get customer pricing, and we're actually going to look at that here in a minute. In the sales customer pricing select, there is no table that I'm querying. It's actually querying code. And for me to query code, that's an application level of an API. If you go to ODBC, you don't query anything with application. You can't do that. You could theoretically with SQL, but you'd have to write it in code. Why not make it? And we'll come back to the intuitive aspects later on some of this. But that's the trade-off, is that we are able to call things. And if I look at the single customer pricing select and look at the WSDL on that, by the way, WSDL stands for Web Services Definition Language. I can put in input parameters here, and I will get output parameters, things like base price, and we'll see this in a tester that we're going to use here in a minute. We have some unit prices. We have all kinds of different other elements that we pass back that you can consume with an adapter. The adapter actually is the code. So how do I do this? Let's go look at an adapter. One adapter that we've created is called a tester, and under my account, you will have, if you sign up for this, you'll have access to it, and this is under the web services. You'll have access to the P21 tester. Now, because I've logged in as an administrator, it's allowing me to select a client. So I could pick, multiple clients and do testing. This allows us to support you. But if on your administration under my account, you would not have that. You would have the choice of an API instance. We'll talk a little bit about that in detail further. But basically, I can set up an API instance to go one against live, one against play. So I've got a P21 demo instance, and then I've got my APIs that are available. If I go look at that sales customer select and click on continue. Now, before I do this, let's go and show you that there's nothing up my sleeve. So if I go over to accounting and I go to accounts receivable, let's go just do a maintenance and customer maintenance. Let's go look at a customer. This is our actual P21 environment that we've got as a test environment. And I can put in there for a customer number 1005665. And I can see address information. I can see credit information, all that information in P21. Well, let's minimize that. And I'm going to now put in my company ID, my customer ID, and say continue. As you can see, performance is quick. It's very quick on this. And I am now seeing address information. So what is this tester? This is code that we have written that is a very raw format of looking for information. The reason we created this is to prevent finger pointing. And we'll get into how you get started, but let's assume you use a third party to write some code using our web services. And all of a sudden, the result set that they're getting back isn't correct. They're not getting the right pricing, for example. What we've done is we've created this tester to prevent the finger pointing. If you can go in and reproduce the problem in the tester, then we know there's a problem with our APIs and web services. If you cannot reproduce it in the tester, then we know it's a problem with the adapter. It's a problem with the code because the tester is just raw. It's just bringing data back. It's not manipulating the data. It's not doing anything with it. So this tester is showing us what is happening with the actual raw data in the raw web services. So if I go back over here and say I want to select the server, and this time I want to do sales customer pricing select. Now click on continue, but before I do that, let's jump back over here. We'll close out this one, and let's go to sales pricing inquiry. And I want to look up pricing for a given customer, for a given sales location ID and a source location ID. So I'm going to put in for 104, 104, 100, oops, 5665. And I want to look up for item 101. If you'll notice on here, the extended price is $31.82. If I go look at the price levels, I'm going to see $50.50 for price level 1. And this is for a customer, how they've set it up and those kinds of things. So I'm not going to get into the details, but you can see I've got pricing information inside of P21 live. If I go back over my tester, put in a customer ID, put in a part number, put in a quantity, put in a location, put in another location, and put in each. Now, I can put in other elements. The ones with the asterisks next to it are the required fields for the APIs to work. The ones without an asterisk are optional. But if you'll notice here, here's the $31.82. Here's the $50.50. So if we pop back over, you'll see those numbers. Here's the $31.82 down here. Here's the $50.85 or $50.50. So we are actually querying live pricing information. Now, hopefully your heads are starting to spin a little bit of how you can use this information. What does this actually get for us? But we'll get into that when we get into the getting started. But this is kind of how we use or some of the features and functions for it. Let's go a little bit further down the path. Okay, I've shown you what it can do. There's a few other things that you'll see on here. We'll talk about web services keys when we get into security, but you have the ability, we'll give you sample code and instructions if you want to write some of your own. The install, if we look at the install, it actually talks you through how to install the APIs on your server. It's customer installable. If you are unable to do it, we can do it on a time and material basis for you, but everybody that's running this right now has been able to do it themselves. And then the API history allows you to see what calls have been made, what updates have been done. Let's talk about updates. Now, I have not done any updates let's not go to experts. Let's go to Gradable Systems. And on the demo for P21, we haven't done any updates. But on the SX side, you'll see it talks about what updates have been happening, have they been compiled. What we're able to do, because this is a cloud web services type of an architecture, we've got to keep the APIs current. So we're able to keep the APIs current by coming through, and I'll talk about the architecture of how we do that for the security aspect, but basically we're able to keep everything current and up to date because we've got all of your APIs exposed to our server. So that's kind of how it all works, and I'm sure this is generating some questions, but let's jump back over to the slide deck again. And let's go to the next question. Oops, went too far. Let's talk about security. In the security, we have a concept called an API key. This API key is what controls who has access to it. While we have exposed those web services, only people that have the API key will have access to your specific data. And I'm going to show you how you set that up here in a minute as I get through this slide deck. What's going to happen is you're going to put the APIs on your P21 box. You're going to expose your firewall only to our IP address, only to a specific port number. So we assign port numbers to the web services. And that what we'll do is we will then be very secure of what has access to your data. And you can control it by users, and I'll show you how this administrative tool works, that even prevents denial of service, the DDoS, to prevent hackers to come in and bring everything down. Ultimately, you're going to want to control this on live versus play. For example, when you start doing, because we can do both read and write, because we can write, you want to test everything in the play environment. That's what we're really trying to focus on. So how does that all play out? Let's go back over here and go to the web services keys. What you're going to see here is, and this just happens to be ours, yours would be a little bit different, you're going to see a key. And that key, I think, is something like 50 characters. I can't remember the number. Whatever that number of characters you're looking at there. That key is what allows you to access a given server. So here we've got it for P21. It's a P21 as we do other ERPs. We specify what kind of a access they have, whether it's full or light. You won't be able to control that. We control that. What's the difference? And I'll get into that a little bit more in detail. Full is the version. They're exactly the same code. What we've done is a licensing piece here. The full version is when you are writing your own code or you've got a third party. Light is when you're doing it with Grey Wolf applications. And we'll talk about which applications those apply to. Pricing is a little bit different, but the technology is exactly the same. That's all it is a price and licensing issue. Then you have a writes piece, and we've put a little help on here. So if you have read-write, you do not have access to any insert or updates. If you have deny, that's a quick way to quickly shut it off, that you want to keep it, but you want to deny that key from, say, a third party. The throttle is what prevents anybody doing a DDoS kind of a hack into it, and it throttles down how many records can be called and will shut it off so we don't have anything happening where it's causing some sort of restriction to your web services. Keep in mind, we've got to keep this live. We've got to keep it up to date. So you'll have access to this. You won't be able to change the type, but you'll be able to change the writes and the throttle. What's the example of that? You may have one key for live, one key for play. You may have a different key for live for a third party. You may have a different key for play for third party. You may only have it for read capability for certain types of applications that they can only read versus being able to update. That's a security level that prevents anything from happening that you don't expect to have happen. So if we look at our security model, it's really designed on the idea of this API key, and that API key has to be able to be passed, and it determines which database, which user, what writes, how much throughput they have, those kinds of things. So it's secure, intuitive. If you've played with the scheduled importer, it's kind of intuitive. You know, if we look at that's a screenshot of it, but if we go back over here and we go into here, you know, what am I going to get when I export invoice or customer information? It's kind of intuitive, but if you've ever played with a scheduled importer where it's coming in, not the export, how many times have you had, oh, you're missing a field, oh, you're missing a field? On our side, we've tried to set the names on the web services so it's intuitive. What am I trying to do? What is it I want to access? And then ultimately, when you look at the WSDL, it shows you the input and output parameters. And if you don't know which ones are required, you go into the tester. The tester tells you which fields are required, which ones are optional. The really cool part about this is, what if you've used Dynachange and created some custom fields? Is there anything in the scheduled importer that's going to support it? If you've got mother's maiden name on the order header and you want to use that mother's maiden name in some sort of a query, or you want to populate that in some way, you're not able to do that because the scheduled importer doesn't support custom fields. So what you'd have to do is you'd have to go and write some code or do some other things, maybe at the SQL level, maybe not use this. What we can do is we can create custom APIs for you that will actually call. We've done this where a custom API then gets put into the web services, and that becomes exposed as a custom web service for you or your third parties, or for us if we want to use it for, say, like EDI or some of the bulk updates. We can actually then use those custom fields that you've done with the Dynachange modifications that you've made. So there's a lot of things that gives you some flexibility there. All right, let's go to the next of the four. Next of the four is affordable. This is the part that surprised me about what Epicor was charging for their middleware. Now, yes, scheduled importer is free. I got it. Get it. But there's some limitations to it. What you get with the web services is it's an activation of $400. It's a one-time. When I say one-time, if you upgraded and went to a different server and we needed to point to a different IP address, that's another activation, because it's something we've got to resubmit all the settings for that connectivity. But as a general rule, it's a one-time update. Then if you are going to run any of our applications, it's $500 a year to run our applications and have access to it. So if you're running our Partner Connect, which is for EDI, you're going to have an anti-fee because it's required, the $500 to be able to access that piece of P21. But if you want to use this for a third party or for your own internal development, because most of you said you're very, very technical. If you know .NET, if you know PHP, if you know Java, you can go and write code that will actually make this work, and you have access to everything that you've seen for $1,500 a year. And now that does not include support. If you need us to talk you through things, that'd be on a time and material basis. But the objective is to make this something that you can actually use and make it available. You're not being held hostage just to Grey Wolf. We want you to be able to get coupled in with this, because it in of itself is a technology that really should be used quite a bit. So how do I get started? Okay, you have four real basic options with this. One is you can use a Grey Wolf application. That Grey Wolf application would be, we're going to get into that here in a minute. That's my sales pitch, if you will. Second is you can create your own application. You can bring this in-house and say, okay, I'm going to write this ourselves. You have that available to you. Another one is you could hire someone to create your own application, create a modification. Go hire a freelancer that knows code and have them do that. Give them access to a key that's temporary, and then you go in and change the key. Make that into a configurable parameter that you change the API key so that it calls a different one, and there you don't have access to it, and you can say sayonara when they're actually done with the actual code. Or what if there's a third-party application out there that you want integrated with P21? This is kind of the coolest one. We've worked with guys like Second Phase or Computer Pundits, or I'm trying to think of some of the others that we've worked with that have actually written code, used our web services and APIs, and actually incorporated it into their actual application. So if you have an HR application that you want to be able to integrate with P21, or you want to do your own WMS instead of using the one that comes from Epicor, you can actually go and find a third party, give them the sample code, let them modify their code so that it actually comes back into your P21 world and do your own integration. Or you can contract us to do that kind of stuff if it's using a third-party code instead of using our application. So you've got a lot of flexibility with these web services that you don't have, and most importantly, It's real time. It's not something that comes in through a flat file like it does with a scheduled importer. It's real time. It happens now. That pricing, like I showed you, happened now. It didn't happen by transferring a file. So what are some of the things that we've done? What are some of the integration pieces we've done? Well, this is a slide that shows the architecture of where we fit. Your distribution system being P21, your trading partners, we focus primarily on trading partners is who we kind of deal with. We do EDI, we do e-commerce, and we do a mass maintenance tool. If you want to be able to mass update P21, we've got a tool called NewSync. Those are our three products that focus on it. If you notice, wrapping around the distribution system is all the web services. That's how we use it. And then we can actually incorporate that technology to have it work with your trading partners. We've happened to do mappings for Partner Connect. And by the way, that's a registered trademark. That is completely different than TPCX. And in fact, I've gone to Epicor and told them that they are in breach of a trademark on that. Trading Partner Connect is a breach of the Partner Connect trademark, and they're so big that they have totally just ignored us, and they've tried to get around it by calling TPCX now. Magento, if you're not familiar with it, is a e-commerce solution. We'll get into that a little bit detail here. And NewSync is our mass maintenance. Well, let's talk about Partner Connect. It works with both EDI and non-EDI documents. Our focus on this is the idea it's back office to back office integration. Fully integrated with P21, uses the web services. It's hosted at our data center, so the pricing is only based off of setup fees and transactional fees. You don't have to put any software. It's all being done at our server. Well, that's really kind of cool when you start thinking about it from a supportability perspective, from a pricing perspective, and everything everybody's been talking about cloud applications. This now allows you to have that technology available to start onboarding all of your trading partners, whether it be customers or vendors. Magento is our e-commerce solution. Now, most of you have probably heard of that, and we're going to have a webinar coming up next week on Magento versus ECC. But we're using the Community Edition. We'll go into more detail in the webinar, the differences between the Community Edition and the Enterprise Edition. Integrated with P21, fully integrated gives, again, we saw pricing availability is there, being able to place orders. You know, placing orders is a tough API, and that's integrated into the Magento piece. It's hosted at our data center, and all you pay for, instead of paying for a large fee up front, you pay for a transactional fee based on orders or payments. If you want to know more about this, take a look at our website or our upcoming events and register for the Magento website that's coming up on, I think it's Tuesday of next week. The next one is, come on, there we go, is NewSync. This allows for an intuitive update of P21. Now, there's ways you can do that with scheduled import and everything else. This is being done from a spreadsheet. Most of your people, like buyers, understand the concept of a spreadsheet. And that spreadsheet allows you to manipulate, take information, do calculations, and then drag and drop it to a website. And that actually then integrates with P21 where it populates the P21 data. Before that, you can even do a mini data warehouse. It will extract data from P21 so that you can see what's in the database before you actually bring it over. Can you do this in other ways? Absolutely. But this was really meant for an intuitive approach for your buyers, your non-technical users. Okay, I got through. My goal was to get through in about 45 minutes to answer questions. I respect your time. I know that there's some things maybe you want to take offline. I appreciate that as well. Go to the chat, ask questions. Also, if you raise your hand, we can have you raise your hand and have you go into asking questions verbally if you'd like. But at this point, I'm going to open it up to questions. If I don't get any questions, I'll try to release you to your busy day. Any questions? Doesn't look like it. All right. Oh, here we go. How do you ensure your API works with all versions of P21? That's a great question. As a general rule, what happens is when we're doing a data level API, we're doing an inquiry. And because we're querying against the database, unless the fields have been removed, which has happened to us actually. Epicor has removed fields, which surprises us. We are supporting, I think it's version 15 and higher, and we test because of our relationship with our customers. We test when they stay current with the latest version. We've got people running on version 18 right now. I think we've got people testing on 2019 right now. And so from a data level API, it's pretty straightforward. And if there's something we'd have to do with versioning, we could do that. But as a general rule, that's not a problem. Where the challenge becomes is things in the application level, like an order insert or a pricing. And the nice part of how we've done that is we're actually calling the application level of P21. So if things change in those calls that we're making, we're calling it at the head stream. And so everything transfers downstream from there. So it makes it easier as the new releases come out. They really won't break anything because we're calling code. We're not rewriting code. We're not writing our own. So it makes it a lot easier for us to stay current on things as we go through it. Great question. Hopefully I answered the question. Other questions? Okay. Feel free. You've got my information on the screen right there of my information. Feel free to drop me an email if you'd like. Pop me off. Call me. We can feel free to go into details. But hopefully what we've done is we've shown you how simple, intuitive, affordable using web services are for working with P21. I really appreciate your time. Hopefully you have a great day, and we hopefully see you at another next webinar. Other than that, have a great day.